hola.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Welcome to my podcast where we're discussing the collaboration between intimacy directors and stage managers.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. We've worked together. Michael knows who we are, but for those who don't, who might see this, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Morgan. I am a current third-year stage manager student at Columbia, also getting my MFA. And I also stage managed the Office musical Parody at the Theater Center, as well as some of the other shows that are going on there.
Awesome. So as you know, as I said, this is about the collaboration between intimacy directors and stage managers. Can you speak a little bit about your experience on that?
Absolutely. When I was recalling and you asked me to come on this show, I was like, yeah, I've actually worked with an intimacy or a fight coordinator in every show that I've worked on in Columbia.
Wow, okay.
And
intense.
Yeah, they all love sex, these shows. And I think it's showing the current trend of what's going on though in theater, and showing things that are graphic and like, I mean, some have been graphic, some have been consensual, some have been, it depends on the situation. Either way, it's been shown.
Yeah. So can you speak about your first production here at Columbia? What entailed the intimacy direction and like how that process went?
Yeah. So I would say the first big one that used intimacy direction was Botticelli and the Fire. There is a full-on sex scene in that show where the actress gets naked and they roll around on the ground in what is essentially a canvas sheet, like for painting. And they were nude. The other actor was not fully nude, but didn't have much of anything on underneath. And that was what was performed for audiences.
So was this your first performance, your first play that you worked on that had that type of...
That level of intimacy, for sure.
And were they actually nude on stage, or
Yes.
just like nothing, except for the person that had some clothing?
I guess the one actress had very thin like underwear on, but no
bra.
No bra.
You're so funny.
The actress had no bra and was exposed and definitely showed things out to the audience as well.
Okay. So we know productions here take like 6 weeks total, honestly, like between rehearsals, tech, and performing them. When did the intimacy director join the process, and how was that process for you in terms of addressing these scenes?
For this show specifically, I think I remember it being a little bit late on the process.
Okay.
I'm not gonna lie. The whole process in general was a little bit behind on everything, but I do remember specifically that the intimacy director joined a bit late and things did feel a little bit rushed. And like in the end, everyone felt comfortable and was able to get all the choreography correct, but for that level of intimacy and exposition, it felt that there wasn't enough time.
Okay, and so thinking of the fact that it was a little rushed, can you speak on what occurred in that rushed process that made the actors feel comfortable enough to perform these scenes in a consensual, consent-based, safe, brave environment?
To me, I wasn't the PSM on this show, I was an ASM.
Okay.
So I didn't know the full level of everyone's friendships and past relationships, but it felt like these two actors were friends already.
Okay.
And that definitely helped to having an established bond.
Yeah.
Which they were lucky to have, honestly. And I felt like, doing everything that you can to make these actors feel comfortable, having closed rehearsals, taking, even if it is introduced delayed into the process, taking the amount of time that's necessary to really review everything and in depth and checking in and making sure that everyone's okay with each step of what happens.
Yeah, I was a part of, I covered your rehearsal once, and I remember that even before going in, I had no idea what the play was about, and I didn't know that there was a scene like that in the play, but I remember the PSM I don't even remember if it was said to me, but I know that at the beginning of rehearsal, when we were doing a run through, because I think that's what we did that day, the director was like, let's just rush through this because we don't need to. And it was specifically because the PSM was on Zoom. I was like a new member in the space. And so I think whatever work you had done before that moment was definitely present, and the director was honoring it because they respected the fact that like there's a strange person in the room and there's no need to do this.
Exactly.
Another thing that has come up in the research that I've been doing and like talking with folks is that you do have a base, like a base choreography, but then there's also placeholders. Was that in fact in place?
Absolutely.
Great.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's been on every show that I've done as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. On the most recent show that I did, we didn't lift placeholders until dress rehearsal.
Interesting. Okay. And can you talk about that experience? Three Penny Opera.
Yes. This show had a couple different variations of intimacy and fight going on.
Yeah.
And actually some of the intimacy was cut just because it wasn't necessary. And this had been my probably 5th time working with Columbia's intimacy coordinator. And so we had a good rapport going in, and I gave her a list of everything that I found in the script and that Ben and I had talked about, so we could hit those things going into rehearsal. And it was that rehearsal definitely was a little bit rushed, in my opinion, just because we had 5 hours and we had a page of things to do. And
that was the only rehearsal you had got to do the intimacy for the play?
Yes, but we introduced it early. Okay. And then we ended up bringing Jacqueline back when we moved into the theater. But like in terms of like staging intimacy, yes. And it was also intimacy and fight as well. So they were like, I had to go through all of those.
A lot of fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how was that? So you said that you handed her, like, you gave her a list of the moments that you and Ben identified. Did you guys talk about it and agree on, yes, these moments are indeed? Did you cut the moments before that list was given to Jacqueline, or were you like rehearsing all of the things and then cut the moments that you decided to cut for? We
did cut the moments in real time during rehearsal because we talked about them all together as a group, and we're like, okay, we can look at this real quick if we feel like we need to. Otherwise, are you okay not doing it? Like, for example, there was a moment where at the time it was Mac the knife takes his knife, puts cake on it, and shoves it into Walter's mouth.
Okay.
And the actor who plays Walter was like, kind of okay, like we can go over it, but I don't need to like spend too much time doing this. So that instance for sure was up to just his comfortability, and eventually it changed to a gun, so we looked at it again, but the whole time he was very fine with not having to review it every time we went into rehearsal. So, but there are other moments that like there was a lift involved in an intimacy moment where one actor lifted another actor and then they went into the bed, and we did that every time. So it really depended on the moment.
Got it. And so how was the collaboration between you and Jacqueline as PSM and intimacy direction in that moment? You can speak about just like conversations you had, or conversations she had with the actors that you were around to listen to, blocking, notating, anything that you want to share.
It was very, very easy, honestly. She's lovely.
She knows how to work with us.
She does really know how to work with us. Yeah. And I think I kind of followed her lead. I told her, I had groups of actors. I had scheduled it so that it was like, we do this group of actors and then this, and then we can release it and have people come. And I was like, okay, Jacqueline, this is what we're gonna do next. And so I had the actors, and if it was something that was intense, like a sex scene or kissing or anything that was like really had big moment of intimacy, Jacqueline asked us all to step out of the room, just spoke with the actor herself, and then we'd come back in after she was done, and there was truly no problems or like struggle in any of that. Like it was all very natural, and just allowing her process to take heed during our rehearsal, because that's what it was for. And so I wanted to be able to honor what she needed to do to make to make our process good as well.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, that's super fair.
Yeah.
What tools did she give you, if any, for when she wasn't in the room and you needed to run these scenes and you needed to supervise these scenes, especially in tech and the run of the show?
Absolutely. She definitely allowed me time to take notes, and I would clarify like how many seconds for a kiss and, you know, making sure that I had just everything written down. And if I needed her to clarify something or needed the actors to clarify something for when I reviewed it with them, that I had the time to write that down and the proper notation. And also, she reviewed certain placeholders with us, as we mentioned, which often for a kiss was just like a high five or a handshake or a cheek to cheek, and making sure that we were just practicing those so that it became and felt really natural over time.
Right.
And that when we eventually lifted the placeholder during dress rehearsal, it was just like a shift, you know?
Got it. That's awesome.
I'm trying to think if there was any other tools specifically. I mean, she didn't really list out certain things, you know, because I feel like we had a good rapport going into it. So.
And you've also done this before, so you kind of just carried a lot of, I'm assuming you carried a lot of the things that you've done before to this process.
Exactly. And it felt, the actors took a lot from it as well. And they made sure to like take their own notes and make sure that they were feeling comfortable with everything too. So I think it was, I think for some of them, it was their first time, I think, working with an intimacy director. So it was a bigger deal for them than it was for me.
Got it. And during the rehearsal that you used for the intimacy, did you have your assistants with you, or was it just you and the director and the intimacy director?
That happened to be a day that my assistants had class. So they weren't there coincidentally. I would have had them there otherwise.
Got it. Okay. Got it. Yeah, it's just good to have a second pair of eyes. That's not the directors.
Yes.
For us to just have.
And making sure, like, even having all the, this is something that she asked specifically, was having all the right props that are needed for intimacy and for fight. For fight, having, you know, placeholder for a gun or a knife. But for intimacy, you know, having a sheet, because there's a lot of sheet choreography that you don't think about. And that really worked its way into our show. So making sure that we had that, making sure we had, there are a couple moments where people are bound up, having the proper like binding and all of that. So that was really important to her to have in rehearsals.
Got it. Now, you mentioned the gun and the cake in the mouth, the zip ties moment. I know this because I saw the show. Was it easy for you to identify what was fight versus what was intimacy?
Yes,
because some things are obvious and some things are not.
To Ben, this whole show was about sex and intimacy, so I approached a lot of the fights
as such,
as intimacy. But I have to say, I could tell what was what. But also, like, there are moments where Jenny gets bound up to a pole, but we use something called kink tape, which was supposed to look like duct tape, but it is used for binding up people, and it doesn't leave like a residue or anything. So it's like there are certain ways that other things work their way into the show. And originally Ben had wanted to stage Mac the Knife in kind of like a kink position when he's in jail. So it was kind of for this show specifically a very fine line.
Yeah, no, that's why I asked, because when I saw it, I saw a lot of sexual tension in the fights and a lot of sexual tension in the violence and vice versa. And so, yeah, I was just like, this is interesting.
Absolutely.
This is very, very interesting. And it was present in almost every scene, like a little bit at least. Awesome. Now I'm gonna change a little bit.
Sure.
And ask if you worked on shows that you thought needed an intimacy director and didn't.
Yeah. There actually was a show in college that I did, Fun Home. And there were a lot of moments that I could tell the actors were not comfortable. And there was, I have to say, a little bit of a hiccup in casting where the actor who played Roy said that he was okay with kissing a man, and then when it came time to, wasn't. Which people are absolutely allowed to change their mind, and
100%.
comfortability levels change all of the time. But our director didn't think. Like, they were not on board with that.
Right.
And very upset about it. So I had to be the one to step in and be like, you know, he's allowed to change his mind. If we don't stage it this way, then we don't stage it this way. Mm-hmm. But it created a lot of tension in the room where I think if we had an intimacy director from the start talking about these things openly, making it a comfortable thing to happen, I think it could have been completely avoided.
I want to dive in a little bit about the power dynamics, just to, like, who was the director? Was it a professor?
Yes.
And then you were the PSM?
Yes.
And who approached the blocking for these scenes? Because I feel like a director, professor telling an actor, like, you know, that's kind of part of the reason why intimacy directors are also in the room, to kind of just help us stage managers shift the power dynamics, because sometimes directors are like
100%.
hell-bent on doing something because they think that's just the way that it needs to be.
Exactly. And I've been so lucky working with Ben because he doesn't think that way at all. And like, if, as I mentioned, some of the intimacy had shifted in the show just because it wasn't necessary anymore, or it didn't work, or even when we got to the stage, he was like, I can't see your faces, let's change this whole thing.
Which
like,
I love that. Yeah.
It's not tied to anything. But again, my professor director was not like that at all. She was like, no, they need to kiss right here. And the actor was like, I really don't feel okay doing that. I'm sorry. Like, I thought I would be, but I'm not.
Yeah.
And she was upset about it.
Was there a resource in the school that could have been that person, or it's just like it wasn't that person? So that show shouldn't have been picked to be done, probably.
Yep. Yeah. Or the director should have been okay blocking it.
Exactly.
Just having them not kiss. And eventually she did concede and just had them, you know, just like a hug or something. But it created a lot of strangeness in the show, which as the PSM, I was not happy about. Because
how did you handle that?
I just tried to, there were other things going on the show too. The choreographer, who was a student, was a little bit too intense for the level of production that we were doing. And so there was already a little bit of tension there. And, you know, all I did was try to just, you know, hear people out, make sure, and just do everything that I could as a student at the time too. And, you know, get everyone's feelings and talk about it and make sure that they're okay separately, even if if this director is being too managing and the choreographer is being too managing, like, how can I then try to recreate this balance in the room when the actors are not feeling comfortable? Did
you feel at that time, and maybe asking what year in college you were in might help, but did you feel at that time that you had the necessary, like, did you feel prepared or like confident in doing that in the room?
At that point I did. I was a senior.
Okay.
But one of the actors was a freshman. The other actor who was on the receiving end of it, who played the dad, was a senior with me, but I don't think had the same confidence as I did. Yeah. And we were friends too, so it's like I was, you know, gonna have his back anyway. But there were a couple first years in the production too, so I think that definitely fed into it as well, especially with the choreographer who was a student being a senior, and all of the first year actors.
Right. A question just popped up, and it's like, sometimes the script says what needs to happen, and directors lean on that. Sometimes directors, like, we're taught to follow what the playwright writes. With Three Penny, you adapted the play, the musical. How much of the adaptation included the intimacy moments, or like were the intimacy moments that you worked on already in the script and you adapted other parts of the script that didn't necessarily? Because the reason why I'm asking and I'm going this way, it's because it's easy to say get rid of it when you're in an educational setting and when you're like making something your own. So I guess, yeah.
Are you, do you want to know like from like the original script to the adaptation? Because I didn't read the original script, so I don't know for sure.
That's fine. I didn't either, and I should. That's fine.
I should. But either way, we did try to stick to the blocking that had been written by Leia, who adapted the show.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we didn't always, and there were certainly detailed stage directions and blocking in the script, but Ben just staged it how he felt. Like there was, I mean, this does not have to do with intimacy, but there was in the final moments when Peachum goes to kill Mac, Peacham's supposed to cross to Mac's platform and then shoot him, but he stayed on his own. So it's like kind of, it was pretty fluid on the way that we adapted the script to the stage.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the fact that it was such a fluid process, especially specifically with these moments, because as I wasn't in the process at all, and I saw it, and I think just listening to you say what the differences are, you guys landed on a great place, because I think I still felt the tension that the other poses might have done.
Yeah.
But I think I still felt that. So that's very good that Ben was open to not like just...
Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, there was a lot of limitations when it came to what we could do in Lenfa space.
Right.
One of the original scenic designs had actors a second level, so actors would go on the second level, and Mac at the end was supposed to be staged up there to die. So Ben also understands that sometimes things need to be the way that they are just to fit a certain venue or a certain performance. And throughout the process, we were like, okay, like, so if we ever re-put up this show, what are things that can change, and what are things that we really want to focus on the next time? And like, so all of it to say, like, that whole process was all encompassing of being fluid and making sure that we could do the right thing for this moment.
Yeah, that makes total sense, because for my first show here had a sex scene, and it was placed in the balcony right next to like the last few rows.
Yeah.
And I think that positioning impacted the level of exposition that the actors had. Because yes, I had people up close, but like lighting can help cover certain things that having them on stage doesn't necessarily. So nice, like, yeah, location.
Absolutely. Lighting and location are huge.
Yeah.
And like sheep.
Yeah. Just necessary. Yeah, like what garments or props we can use to protect, protect, just like the moment. Make sure that the actors feel comfortable.
Polly's costume was a big talking point from the very beginning about whether she'd be in lingerie or whether she would be in garments that made her look nude. And we ended up putting her in lingerie, but that was another thing. Ben was like, okay, we'll see what looks good and what she's comfortable with and go from there.
Yeah. I think that's a big thing that has come up in the research and the conversations I've had already, where we'd be lucky enough, to have intimacy directors and PSMs who are in alignment with consent-based approach, with a consent-based approach, which is why we're having this conversation, because it all happened after the Me Too movement. That's when the position started to be more present in the rooms and whatever. But just having the tone around the play helps out a lot. Which leads me to my next question, which is on your first rehearsal, on the first couple of rehearsals, how did you, what kind of conversations did you, Ben, and the actors have around the tone of the play and the fact that it was the way Ben approached it, which is like sex is present?
It seemed to come up a lot more in design meetings than it did in rehearsal.
Okay.
Specifically when we were going over all of even from the very beginning of policies and procedures meetings with Columbia, Ben explaining this throughout his whole team so that it emanated through all of that too. And he did talk about it in rehearsal too, but I just remember specifically it coming up very early in meetings.
Right, okay.
That he wanted this to just be filled with sex, filled with tension, filled with bad people too, and just his whole thing is showing how bad people do bad things, and now not everybody's perfect, and not allowing bad people to win. And so that was a big thing that he wanted to have come across in this show. And when we got into the room with all the actors, we did start with design meetings and all of that, design presentations for first rehearsal, and that definitely came up during that too.
Got it. Okay. You and I took a seminar of some sorts with Jacqueline about intimacy direction in our early second year. How did that help you approach the following shows that you did after that? Was there any change, I guess, before you took the seminar and worked on shows, and after you took the seminar and worked on shows? Did you take anything from them to approach those scenes? Let's start with that one, and then I'll ask the other question.
Totally. I think I definitely felt more confident working and even just acting as like the intimacy captain moving forward, you know?
Yep.
And so for my last show, for Three Penny, I ended up delegating the fight captain to one of the actors, and I took the intimacy captain role.
Oh, awesome.
So it was great because I was like, okay, I can focus on this, we can do this, and he can take care of all the fight stuff. And it worked really well. But I don't know if I would have felt confident doing that before that.
Yeah.
Before the seminar. I think I learned a lot about notation and just things to pay attention to, and just how it, not necessarily how it feels for an actor to be in this position, but just things to be aware of that they might be feeling, which I thought was really helpful. And before that, I think I would have just felt a bit more lost. So it was really good to just have those 3 hours just to clarify things.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And you can only learn so much from watching and participating in a rehearsal when the main goal isn't to teach you specifically how to do that.
Yeah. Nitpicky question before the big one.
Yeah.
In terms of blocking and notating intimacy choreography, how different is it? Actually, because when we block, it's like they cross stage left, and that's 3 symbols that you put. How much detail do you put into blocking it, into writing intimacy direction?
I would say it's about the same as I do for regular blocking. Okay. And I don't even know if I don't even think I necessarily do symbols or all of that, but just like the counts are really big for me, making sure that you're like, okay, we're not breaking away too quickly or too fast or too slowly, and that, okay, this leg is going to move into a new position that affects the body this way. So like stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where it's not necessarily a more deep, like, I don't know, because that is pretty detailed, but it's not like, okay, this X means this. It's more like, okay, making sure that just writing down things that affect the other person, and like how they can, if they need to review it like choreography, then it would be like that mostly.
Yeah. Do you record the choreography as well? It's intimacy, so it's tricky. But I remember
we didn't record it.
Cool.
I think during a run we did. And we were still using placeholders at that point, and clothing and everything. But that would totally be up to
that's tricky.
to actors, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And it'd be for their own benefit, not really for anybody else.
Yeah. Because then you get into like who sees this and how much is
like
seen.
Maybe lighting if we need to, but otherwise, I would just share it with them.
100%. How has the intimacy? Because when we took the seminar, we talked about consent. We talked about the language around intimacy direction and just like how to approach that in the room and just set the tone. A lot has come up for me in terms of like how the tools from intimacy direction alongside all the classes that we've taken. How to approach just the room in general and like cultural caretaking, and how those tools from intimacy direction have applied for me in the room. Have you found that has happened with you? I mean, you've worked on a lot of shows with intimacy here, but for example, like at the office or outside, do you find that those tools that we've talked about, like mental health aid and consent-based just environments, have you used those tools out?
Absolutely. I do actively use them in the office. We have, for every put-in, if it affects that character, then we have an intimacy call beforehand. And a lot of the blocking, I would say, besides the kiss between Jim and Pam, is adaptable. And there's a song called Nasty that Meredith sings. And Todd Packer comes out and they have a whole little dance.
Right.
There's a butt slap that happens. So every actor that comes in as Dwight, who plays Todd Packer, we're like, okay, we can absolutely just fake it. She can take a foot back and slap you. She doesn't actually have to slap you, so it is totally up to you whether you want to do that or not. Most of the time, they're like, it's fine. But if there was someone who's like, you know what, I'd rather not, then it's no problem. We will just change it as needed.
Yeah.
And I think it does really contribute to the tone of the room, having options, and not feeling so like pigeonholed into something. And you know me, I care for people. No, I'm kidding. I do care for my cast, and I do think that cultural caretaking and and creating a good environment is really important to me. But it's never been my main focus, but I think I still let it seep in certain ways. And allowing for flexibility and adaptability is a way that I do that.
Yeah. You have it in you. That's why it's not your main focus, because it's like it comes naturally to you. And
I would also like to say, this is going back to the last question, the last intimacy director I worked with, who was not Jacqueline, we worked with a separate one, wrote out all of the blocking for me.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so there are other ways that the intimacy,
they can provide
totally
that
dependent on
information.
the intimacy director. Like she wrote out like on a PDF, just like in the little section, like this happens, this happens, this happens. So like it changes. I forgot about that.
No, that's so helpful.
Yeah.
I think that's really useful because we forget. Like we're so focused on the macro, and like we have so many things to take care of that I think that's really useful, especially with note taking. And you have had it, this experience of like maintaining a show, but like just giving notes and just having the actual like.
It was so, because then you could just send that right to the actors too.
Yeah.
And she would take like 5 minutes after our session to just write it out, and then we'd move on and be I'd send that out and be great.
Yeah. And sometimes directors are trying to like share what they're trying to show in the scene, and there's like, they're passionate and like they speak in terms, but then there's like the intimacy direction, like clinical terms of like you place your hand on shoulder. Like I think that also creates a level of comfortability for actors that's like, oh, this is not a big deal. It's like lips and lips. Like it is a big deal, but it turns like making it like distancing themselves from it helps with the comfort.
Yeah, you're like, we're not, you and I are not hooking. Like we're acting. Yeah. And like I think putting that, like being able to remove yourself out of it is so helpful.
Yeah.
And it takes so much pressure off of it.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons why I feel like intimacy directors are super helpful in the room, because that sounds like Angelina and Brad, like all these actors that fall in love during shows, which don't necessarily have to do with the lack of this position, but people get like, you live in the character's life for so long and you like become them that you can get mixed up. And so like even tools of checking in and checking out of the character and like.
That's really big too. I think that's something I didn't mention, but now you bring it up, like being able to like tap in and tap out, like for all of my actors, I had them check in at the beginning of the day, and I was like, listen, we don't have to run this whole intimacy thing as an intimacy all before the rehearsals. As long as you guys check in and are on the same page with each other, I am fine with that. And if that's good with you, good with me.
That's totally, valid. Not everything needs to be rehearsed all the time, because it's also like draining.
100%.
And it's part of the maintenance of the actors and the show and all of it.
Yeah, and that one with the lift and then going to the bed, I could tell it got a little tiring for us to redo it over and over again on Mac because the lift was involved and he got a little tired. So I was like, okay, like let's do it past the lift. Now we're on the bed, just like putting it in segments too for like rehearsing the parts that actually need to be rehearsed first, like instead of just like doing the whole sequence just to do the whole sequence.
Yeah, especially on days like Tech where we're in the same scene over and over again and we want to see the same moments over and over again. We don't necessarily need to do it full 100.
Exactly.
We don't expect dancers to do that. Why would we expect actors to kiss and make out in front of us 100%? Yeah.
And that's why we didn't even lift the placeholders before Tech, because you're like, why would we do that?
Yeah.
It didn't benefit anyone.
Yeah. I remember in high school. In high school, I did a play where I had to kiss someone on stage, and I did not kiss them until the first day of performance. And because I was just so scared, and I was 17, and it was a teacher, like, building a play. Like, it was so weird, but we wanted to make the play. And it was like, I think it was like, I was 17, like, I hadn't had a lot of boyfriends. I hadn't kissed a lot of people. And so it was like a big deal for me. But it helped. Someone was just like, you're not kissing this person, you're kissing the character. Yeah. And I'm like, you would think a 17-year-old who's in acting school would know that. But it's a big deal. Like, and it was like with the Playboy of the school. Like, everybody wanted
of course.
So like, he had been around, I hadn't been around. So I was like, oh my God, people are gonna judge me and whatever. But yeah, that's just knowing that the professor didn't push for me to be like, you have to kiss him every day.
Good.
That didn't happen. And I think,
there is something, though, about getting at least a rep or two in before the show.
Yes, because then it looks weird. You want it to look real. Yeah. Thankfully, it was just a peck. And I remember the first night I was like, and like, I'm sure for the front row, it did not look good. For the back row, it was fine. Yeah. But totally. I remember I was like, oh, and the makeup was like all smushed. Because I think I cried a little. It was like, TMI. A lot of information about me. You mentioned something about options and flexibility, and just like letting the actors have the option to say no to something, which is again with the consent-based approach, because a lot of actors are like always down to do whatever because they think that makes them more hireable, or just like, oh, you're fun to play with on stage, let's like, you can do whatever. But they don't necessarily are okay with it. They just think that's gonna get them the job. So knowing that there's people out there, you, me, the people I've talked to already, that are like, you don't have to if you don't want to. That's so fair, and I don't know why I'm talking about it like it's a new thing when
it kind of is, though.
But it is. But isn't that wild?
It's so insane to me, and it's just, I couldn't imagine going through, I mean, this is a profession. This is what we do for jobs, and being so, okay, whatever happens to me is a little disheartening to me in a way. It's scary, and how people have just been, especially women, you know, have been in this position for so long just because they want to be happy at their jobs and do something they love, so that they're okay. Oh no, it's fine. I'll
so
get slapped or whatever, you know. And
Yeah.
it's tough. It's tough to see, and I think me specifically, as a woman in a position of power, being able to fight against that in any way that I can, and if I sense any sort of uncomfortableness or strange vibes, it's just something that I would be able to help with and help work through and make sure that every party is okay. Because at the end of the day, like, this is theater, this is a job, it shouldn't be that crazy.
Yeah, and like some stories are very heavy, and some stories make us, every story requires actors and everybody in the team to be vulnerable all the time. Then you add that like actual physical movements that expand that vulnerability, and then you have the option to like, you don't have the option, like in worlds, you don't have the option to say no, like that's a lot. So I'm glad that we're moving forward.
Me too.
In a positive way, in that the industry is welcoming, and James, who we've talked to a couple of times, is everywhere.
Yes.
I think like every 2 shows that open on Broadway, they're on one of them.
Yes.
They're actually working at MTC right now for Eureka Day, which I'm trying to remember where in the script there is intimacy, but they're also like, they have a long title. They encompass a lot of things, sensitivity and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And James has done things with sensitivity too, which is, you know, not necessarily intimacy or intimacy direction, but it is catering to things that people feel uncomfortable or strange about.
I mean, the play's about a mumps outbreak at a private school, and it's the PTA talking about vaxxers and anti-vaxxers. So in today's, like in 2024, when the elections are next week. So it's,
Things are heated right now. Things like people need even just an outlet to talk to people about, you know? And I think that's something that I like to be, is a place that people can go to talk to if they're like, first, feeling strange about anything. Second, need clarifying on anything. Yeah. And I just love to be in that role to just like help them feel more secure about what they're doing. Yeah. And I think that's what Ann James does. Yeah, and I think because it is built in our role to be that person, to be that resource, I advocate for us to educate ourselves on how much, like as much as we can within like the theatrical production world, also the outside world and what could impact our productions. But I'm also advocating to have a person whose sole purpose is to be the resource. Yes. Because we wear multiple hats. 100%. We focus on so much that, yes, we're capable of doing this, and yes, it's part of our jobs, and we have the tools to do it. But like you said, that you focus on intimacy captain, and an actor was fight captain. Like, there's only so much we can carry. There's only so much we can focus on and make sure that it's right, and that like it goes on with the vision that has been established. Yeah. And I feel like I just kind of operate based on vibes. Yeah. But if you have so much going on, I miss things. Yeah. You know, I can't be the only person. Things fall through the crack all the time. We're human. Exactly. Yeah. And when you have a system that's catering to just like seeing, trying to understand how people are feeling, even if they're not saying that, it's so helpful to have somebody else, just like another set of eyes, be like, oh, that felt a little strange. 100%. Like that, something's off there. Like, and or if I do notice something, being like, hey, can you check in with them? You know, not always having to be the person to address it, but just like having two sets of people just to be able to look at a same issue and just be on top of it.
And not only us as PSMs, like the SM team as a whole.
Absolutely.
Which I know that you are very like, you're your team. Like it's like your unit. That's how you operate. So. And
I chose my team very specifically for Three Penny, and a person that I requested was someone that I thought would be like really helpful in terms of like creating community and being a people person and all of that. So I chose it very specifically because I know that it can't always be something that I'm focusing on and is important to me. That's awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Morgan. You're so welcome. This was a lovely conversation. We unpacked a lot. We did. We talked about a lot of things, and I'm very grateful. Thank you for having me. This was really fun. Good luck on your thesis. Thanks, you too.